It's been a year since COP26 in Glasgow.
Glasgow must be the kickoff of a decade of ambition and innovation to preserve our shared future.
The Scottish Government has set itself an ambitious legal target of reaching net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. That's 5 years ahead of the UK as a whole. But for Scotland, there's still a long way to go, and interim targets have been missed.
The world has changed so dramatically that I think there is a sense that there hasn't been the momentum out of Glasgow that we might have hoped for. That is perhaps understandable, but it is also regrettable.
For Scotland and the rest of the world, it's a race against time, and irreversible impacts are already taking hold. This golf club has stood on Scotland's east coast for 460 years. The fifth oldest club in the world. But the unstoppable force of climate change means the chances of a long future are fading.
How quickly is the landscape that we're looking at changing?
It's changed in 24 hours. There's a mid-section of dunes there that's just about to go. There'll be more loss within the next 24 hours.
Climate change is causing sea levels to rise. Coupled with increasing numbers of storms, the course is disappearing at an alarming rate.
So talk me through this bit that we're looking at here.
Well, this is the third tee, built in 2017, because we had to sacrifice the old third tee, which was predominantly the ladies' tee. It went out there about 8 metres, no longer there, it's gone.
So when this was put in, how far from the edge was it?
About 13, 14 metres then. It's 6 metres now.
John has been campaigning for decision makers to step in and help for decades, but to no avail.
We can put rock armour in from the second here, hard defences all the way through to the North West River. Or we can look at environmentally sustainable solutions, which would be something that stops the waves hitting the beach. So it can happen. If there's a will, there's a way. But there's a cost involved.
Saving the club isn't only a concern for golfers. Thousands of people live in Montrose, and if the sea breaches the dunes, their town will be hit with a flood of water.
Do you think that maybe decision makers think that they have more time than they have?
I think so, yeah. We will have a situation whereby one day with a south-southeasterly and a high tide swells, that Montrose could be in a bit of trouble.
Coastal erosion is a big concern, not just in Montrose, but across the country. Scotland has 21,000 kilometres of coastline, with a fifth of us living within 1 kilometre of the sea. £18 billion worth of assets, such as buildings and infrastructure, lie within 50 metres of the shoreline, and the vast majority of which are vulnerable to coastal erosion and flooding. Sea levels began rising about 200 years ago when the world industrialised, but the rate at which that's happening has dramatically accelerated in the last 20 years. It's thought many parts of Scotland, including this area here in Ayr, will be underwater in as little as 10 years. And well, you only have to look at Greenham Castle over my shoulder to realise just how vulnerable our coastlines already are. On this beach in Ayr, the council is recycling festive waste to keep the sea at bay. So how many Christmas trees are there underneath here?
There's literally hundreds of Christmas trees under here. When we asked the public to help us, we had an absolutely fabulous response.
We've been able to thatch this area. That's helped the sand to build up, and these sand dunes now protect this car park.
The stretch of dune has been building for 3 years and will take a few more to fully mature. But dunes won't work against more aggressive forms of erosion, and new ways must be found to prepare for the future.
We know that we need to really focus on what the challenges are and work with people to address them so that people are ready and prepared, and that we are able to do what we can do to make it as easy a transition into the future as we can.
From the coast to the countryside, climate change is making its mark. Ian Wilson runs a 2,000-acre arable and livestock farm in Aberdeenshire. He lives his life by the weather, and so do his 22 workers.
It seems to be either too wet, too dry, too hot, too cold. The traditional seasons don't seem to be that way anymore. Those extremes just put too much luck in the job. You play all your cards, you've got all your ducks in a line. Along comes Mother Nature and ruins all your good plan.
As a farm manager, how is it watching in those periods of drought when there isn't anything you can do, watching those crops kind of wither and die?
Terrifying. The biggest trouble you have in farming is it's a yearly cycle. We plant the crops now, we don't harvest them until August next year. We can make small changes, we can make improvements, but it's a year until we know if that's worked. We all know we have to adapt, not just from a climate point of view, from a financial point of view.
What is your biggest frustration with running a farm?
I get very frustrated when farmers are getting tarred with the sort of environmental bad guys brush, and particularly livestock farmers and cattle in particular always seems to get tarred with that brush. Yet we've got a proportion of our farm that's fit for nothing but livestock farming. If I could grow crops and grow vegetables on it, I would. Food security has to go hand in hand with the climate debate, because all we're going to do is we're going to export the problem.
I'm sick of that narrative as well. Farmers they're the custodians of our land in Scotland, and they are in the teeth of climate change already in terms of the impact. So they understand better than most people how important this is to deliver what they can deliver, which is our transition to net zero.
But it's not just farming that's going to be impacted by climate change. Fishing will inevitably have to adapt as the types of fish found in our waters changes due to rising sea temperatures. Whisky production, which relies heavily on an abundance of water, is going to become more difficult as drought becomes more prevalent. And even the types of trees we can grow in Scotland is changing, with some species already blighted by fungus and pests that thrive in more humid conditions.
And some of Scotland's iconic wildlife is already starting to disappear. Wild salmon, mountain hare and Atlantic puffin are just some of the ever-growing number of species under threat.
Climate change is intensifying. We can reduce how much that progresses. This is the biggest challenge our society faces in this whole century. So I know governments are tackling cost of living and energy and food crises, but all of those are contingent, actually, long term, on addressing climate change. Same with the energy crisis. The fundamental way we tackle that is to shift off fossil fuels. So inaction is not an option.